All right. Well, this is undoubtedly a big version of 49ers intel. It was the last day of training camp, and I was down on my way to training camp, and I was thinking, it might be a boring day. The 49ers might just be running a light practice heading into the final preseason game against the Chargers on Friday. But then I thought to myself, what if something crazy happens today? How am I going to cover it? What's the article going to be like? What's Twitter or X going to be like? What's the channel going to be like? And lo and behold, something crazy happened. Right before we went out to practice, we found out that Sam Darnold was indeed QB2. Now, that's not crazy because I think it was expected. I had been talking about that for a while. I think there had clearly a gap had developed between Sam Darnold and Trey Lance as far as practice performance and game performance went, as far as the floor went, especially the floor, because that's what you're looking for in QB2. That's why I talked about that so many times. That in and of itself wasn't all that crazy, but the fact that it was announced or leaked or however it got to Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero today, that was crazy. And then compounding the situation was the fact that Trey Lance wasn't on the practice field. And I think further compounding the situation beyond that was the fact that neither John Lynch nor Kyle Shanahan spoke to the local media that was at practice today, even though they weren't initially scheduled to speak. They obviously wanted to downplay this. They obviously wanted to control the message in their own way. And Kyle Shanahan did speak in a pre-recorded radio interview with KMBR, which he's contractually obligated to do later on in the day. So that's when we got a little bit of insight into what happened, because Fred Warner and Javon Hargrave, the two 49ers who spoke to the media today after practice, certainly didn't give the insight. But based on what Kyle Shanahan said, he let Trey Lance know this morning. He called Lance into his office this morning, and Shanahan said that he told Trey that Sam Darnold had won the number 2 quarterback job for the 49ers. Shanahan has these conversations a lot because you have to cut players a lot. You have to let players know that they lost a certain position battle. This one obviously has more scrutiny on it. And Shanahan said it was a very tough conversation. And he said that, after looking at how Trey Lance reacted to the conversation, he said it'd be best if Lance went home to gather himself and returned the next day. That'd be tomorrow for the walkthrough. Kyle Shanahan expects Trey Lance to play in the preseason game on Friday. Now, we don't have any other color into this. We didn't have a chance to ask Kyle Shanahan any follow-up questions. We probably won't have a chance until after the game on Friday. Presumably, based on what Kyle Shanahan said today, Trey Lance will have already played in the game on Friday. So we have to dissect all of this, what might have happened from limited information. But obviously, we know that Trey wasn't happy. I don't think any competitor would be happy. And we know that the 49ers still have Lance under contract. And we know, based on what Kyle Shanahan said about his conversation with Trey Lance and about just the general reality of the situation, we know that the 49ers are open to all options, as they should be. But one of the options the 49ers have is to keep Trey Lance. And it might be their only feasible one if they want to maintain the greatest possible currency for the time being. And I'll talk about that, and I'll talk about Trey Lance's future as we go through this show. But today was the Darnold Lance inflection point. This is an inflection point that we knew was coming at some point. The 49ers had to determine who their quarterback 2 was going to be. Now, yesterday when we talked to Kyle Shanahan, it didn't seem like the quarterback 2 decision was going to be announced this quickly. Why was it announced more quickly? I'm not sure. That's two dots that we're still trying to connect, right? Because Shanahan had made it sound like he was going to take this all the way up to week 1. Obviously, in week 1, he was going to have to designate the emergency third quarterback due to the new NFL rule. That would have essentially forced the 49ers into an answer. Maybe Kyle Shanahan meeting with us and talking about the technicalities of that rule made him decide, hey, if I've already decided on Sam Darnold, who's shown me enough to be the quarterback 2, this is who I want. Maybe I just tell Trey Lance the next morning and be done with it. But that being said, the 49ers, I mean, you would think that they would want to get out in front of this a little bit more and have Shanahan announce it on his own terms. So it's possible that word got to Lance. Lance and Darnold have the same agent, and Jimmy Sexton. And then Jimmy Sexton leaked it to the media. I don't know. I mean, again, speculation. It's possible that happened. And then the 49ers obviously weren't out in front of it. And then Kyle Shanahan didn't talk until KMBR. At the end of the day, the dust will settle the way that the dust is going to settle. We'll get all the explanations that people want to give at a certain point. We'll probably see Trey Lance playing on Friday. I think it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Trey Lance wasn't happy about the news today because he's been fighting for that quarterback 2 spot. But it also doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the 49ers financial situation and realize that they might be in a little bit of a bind here. And, to help illustrate where the 49ers are, I'm going to zoom out and let's consider some perspective. Time is a flat circle. Teleport yourself back in time to last August. Jimmy Garoppolo was on a side field practicing. Everybody was talking about when are the 49ers going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo? They're obviously moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo. Who are the trade partners going to be? Yada, 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 yada. Kept on going through that whole laundry list of talking points throughout the course of the whole offseason. Obviously, the 49ers were having difficulty trading Jimmy Garoppolo, even though they wanted to do that because he was hurt. He was recovering from shoulder surgery. How did that situation resolve itself? Well, there was an inflection point coming up, a deadline. It was the 53-man roster cut down of last season. And as the 53-man roster cut down grew closer, the 49ers and Jimmy Garoppolo looked at each other and said, wait, maybe the best situation right now is for us to come back together with a new contract, restructure the deal so it fits under the salary cap, and bring you back as a backup. And Jimmy Garoppolo looked at the 49ers and said, I think that's probably the best situation. So essentially, the 49ers bought themselves time throughout the entire 2022 offseason by keeping Jimmy Garoppolo on their roster because they view quarterbacks as an asset. They view quarterbacks as currency. And the unexpected twist did happen, but the 49ers were prepared to capitalize on it when it did. Garoppolo was willing to return at less money. The 49ers were more than happy to have him back at less money. They brought Garoppolo back into the fold. They maintained their option power by holding on to a quarterback who was an asset. They treated a quarterback like currency. And by holding on to their option power, the 49ers were rewarded richly for it, because Jimmy Garoppolo ended up being a valuable contributor last year after Trey Lance got hurt in week 2. I am not saying that these two situations are exactly the same, but I am saying that there are similarities. And the main similarity is an overarching one in how the 49ers treat quarterbacks, how any team probably should treat quarterbacks. You should view them as a valuable asset because it's the most important position in the league. 49ers learned that. They already knew that last year, but they definitely got a refresher on it when they ran out of QBs in the NFC Championship game and everything went kaput after that, right? So in the case of Trey Lance, what's the trade market for Trey Lance? We have so many reports coming out right now about what might have happened in the offseason. The 49ers were interested in trading with the Vikings were interested in Trey Lance. The 49ers were interested in trading with the Vikings. That was an offseason, though. And it doesn't sound like the 49ers got an offer that blew them away. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. They didn't get an offer that blew them away enough to pull the trigger on a trade. It's a lot harder to execute these types of trades after the draft. It's really hard to execute these trades at this time of the year because rosters are more or less set. Coaches have decided their quarterback 1, their quarterback 2. Funny enough, the Vikings, the team that is, part of the rumor mill, probably the most prominent potential trade partner for the 49ers in the rumor mill. Their backup right now behind Kirk Cousins, who we know that Kyle Shanahan likes, is Nick Mullins. But supposedly the Vikings really like Nick Mullins, and the Vikings have a rookie third stringer as well. But anyway, depth charts are close to being set right now. Bringing in another quarterback like Trey Lance, well, where do you fit him? Another team would have to be willing to carry 3 quarterbacks. The 49ers are one of the few teams that seems set on carrying 3 quarterbacks this year. We can't even rule out the 49ers carrying 4 quarterbacks. And that's part of the roster contortion process that I was alluding to a little bit earlier. They bent over backwards to carry Jimmy Garoppolo as long as possible last year to preserve their option power. And the 49ers might bend over backwards to carry Trey Lance this season to preserve their option power. I don't know if there's a market for Trey Lance right now. Jeff Howe wrote a great article. He writes for The Athletic, where I write, and he went out and talked to executives around the league, 8 of them. Some of them thought the 49ers might be able to command a high draft pick for Trey Lance. Some of them thought they won't be able to command anything. There's a hugely disparate range of possibilities here as far as the potential tradability of Trey Lance. And again, even if he might be, theoretically worth a second or a third or a fourth round pick, doesn't mean that a team is necessarily in position to give up that kind of draft capital at this moment in time. Somebody might have been willing to give it up before the draft, but not now. But the 49ers weren't in position to dispose of Trey Lance earlier. They might be in better position to do that now because a lot of stuff has changed, right? Brock Purdy is back fully healthy. Sam Darnold has played really well throughout training camp and the preseason. He's established himself as a competent number 2 in Kyle Shanahan's system. They've signed Brandon Allen this offseason. He's a competent number 2. He's proven it already under Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. So now the 49ers have 3 pieces that make Trey Lance more expendable than he's ever been. But even though Trey Lance is expendable, do the 49ers have a chance to expend him? Because you can't just cut him. It cost the 49ers over $5 million to cut him. They don't have that kind of cap space right now. So, and a cut would be a waive, right? Because you have to waive him. He'd be exposed to waivers, and you'd have to see if somebody else claimed him. If somebody claimed him, it would let the 49ers off the hook of the contract. But I'm not sure if the 49ers would want to part with Lance for nothing, A, and B, would they want to risk nobody claiming Trey Lance and then sit there and have to pay $5 million more than they were originally slated to pay. I don't know if the 49ers would be willing to do that. So that's why we heard Shanahan talking the way that he was talking today. And it was summarized by this. Shanahan says that he wants Lance to play Friday and he wants Lance to be with the 49ers next season. I know that I left out a word there, so I'm going to add that word, and I'm going to put the title back up. He wants Lance to play on Friday, and he wants Lance to be with the 49ers this season. Now, Shanahan, at the same time, also said a lot of things, but you could tell that he's fortifying himself for all possibilities, which is why I talk about option power so much. You should be ready for all possibilities because football's a battle, right? You're on the battlefield, and you have to be ready for the twists and turns that the NFL can potentially bring. So here is the gist of Shanahan's quotes today on KMBR. If you want this to be a little bit bigger, maybe I can make it a little bit bigger. Zoom in. And I'm just going to read through some of this. And I'm going to give you context as we get further and further through. First off, here's the top. This is from Kyle Shanahan. I'm really hoping that Trey can stay with the 49ers. This isn't a thing that we're giving up on Trey. This is more about how Brock played in his 7 games, and that was decided before the season started, and how good Sam has looked. They've both looked good, but we do have to make a decision here, and you only get so many reps at it. And we feel that starting about 10 days ago, Sam really separated himself, and we've got to keep it real in that way. But I feel very fortunate to have both of them here. I really hope when it's said and done that all 3 of these guys are here, and you never know when that's going to come up. We needed 4 guys last year. It doesn't happen much, but if we can have Trey as an option here, I would feel extremely happy about that. I think the other quarterbacks in our room would, and I think our team would. Trey's a very well-liked guy, one of the better people I've been around, and I do think he's going to have a lot of success in this league. It's been a tough road for him because the times he has gotten an opportunity, he ended up getting hurt and missed that window. And now he's in this position. All right, I'm going to cut it off right there, and I'll come back to the last graph in a second. But the first 2 graphs are Kyle Shanahan talking about how much he wants Trey Lance to be part of the mix, realizes it might not be possible because of roster constraints, right? And, if you are offered something for Trey Lance in this trade window, probably would be smart to take it. So Shanahan talking about how it would be great to have Trey Lance as an option if it works out that way. So Shanahan talking about how it'd be great to have that option with Trey Lance if it works out that way. Quick little blip there. I do this thing where I X myself out of the screen accidentally sometimes, and it's no fun for you, I'm sure, as the viewer, but seems like you guys are still there. So, I mean, it would be great if it worked out that way. And it reminds me so much of the situation last year with Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, you're talking different quarterbacks, you know, different. It is a different spot for the 49ers, but the similarities are there because last year the 49ers, it fell into their lap and the ended up being the best possible scenario. They were able to keep Jimmy Garoppolo. That option was on the table for them at a lower cost than they envisioned it being there. And, you know, maybe in this situation, although Trey Lance has got the guaranteed rookie deal and the dynamics are different, you're not going to be able to rework the deal. Maybe here, maybe there also will be the absence of a trade market, and the 49ers will have to enter the season with Trey Lance on their roster, and they'll be happy with the optionality. You cannot rule it out. And I think that's why Kyle Shanahan said what he did in this quote, right? But we have to go to the last part of the quote now. This is where things change gears. We'll always try to do right for Trey. This is at the bottom, by the way, bottom third. If he's in a better situation that his heart's in and something like that, we're going to make sure to do something that doesn't hurt him in that. So that's stuff I talked to him about this morning. That's stuff that I'll talk to him about tonight and continue to talk to him about. But Trey knows how I feel about him, and I hope he ends up being able to be here. That's the best thing for him. But we've got to see what is the best thing from now until then. I get it. Kyle Shanahan has a very roundabout way of talking, right, in these situations. But I don't think it could be much more clear. I think that we can read in between the tea leaves. When a coach says something like, we'll always try to do right for a player. So Shanahan said, we'll always try to do right for Trey. And then he says, if he's in a better situation that his heart's in, well, that I think very obviously means that he's looking at potential trade partnership situations. Where else can Trey Lance play, right? And again, the 49ers don't want to give away an asset for free. And that's always something that you have to factor in when you're looking at the bigger picture of these things. But right now they have right now they're going to maintain their option power as long as a better option doesn't come up. And we don't know if the 49ers are going to be offered something that's worth their time for Trey Lance right now. We do know that the roster cut down, the next inflection point is on Tuesday, August 29th. And there's going to be an opportunity cost in carrying Trey Lance as QB3 on this roster. And that opportunity cost is you don't get to carry somebody else because you could only carry 53, right? But it might be an opportunity cost the 49ers are willing to swallow for the time being. Because, again, even if there is not a trade market for Trey Lance right now, this could be a fluid situation. One can open up over the course of the season. We see this happen a lot. Quarterback gets hurt in this spot. Another quarterback gets hurt in this spot. Somebody underperforms in another spot. Boom, all of a sudden there's a market during the season. That's before week 8, the trade deadline. So by carrying Trey Lance on the roster, it's like buying time. It's like a quarterback buying time. Even if you're planning to ultimately jettison him for a return to recoup some of the enormous cost that you spent to acquire Trey Lance in the first place ahead of the 2021 draft, even if you're planning to do that and it's not currently possible, you can buy time. As a QB, you can roll out of the pocket. You could scramble a bit. You can wait for a receiver to open up downfield. So here's the bottom line. The 49ers still have options with Trey Lance, and don't expect them to fully relinquish these options. Don't expect that to happen until they have a favorable one in front of them. Because, again, if you cut the guy, it's going to cost you more than to keep him, over $5 million more. If you trade him, you recoup a little bit of cap money both this year and next year, and you need that money. And if you're able to trade him, if there is a trade partner, you'll get a pick, and it's nice to soak in some picks, especially after you spent so many on Christian McCaffrey last year. But if neither of those two options are on the table, and you have to keep Trey Lance, And I don't think option one that I just mentioned is really on the table because you don't want to spend more money to cut Trey Lance than to keep him. If you do end up keeping him, well, that's why you have Kyle Shanahan pointing out stuff like this. He wouldn't mind if Trey Lance was on the team. And, people didn't believe that with Jimmy Garoppolo when Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch said it, but it ended up being true. At the right price and the right setup, you want as many competent quarterbacks as possible. The question is, will the setup be right for Trey Lance? And that depends on the rest of the league. What is this guy's value? He has 102 total passes over his career with the 49ers. So that's why there are such big debates amongst NFL executives, too. In Jeff Howe's piece, you saw it about what this guy's value truly is, because there is no consensus among league people. There definitely isn't consensus among fans about who Trey Lance is yet. But that leads us to the 49ers situation. The 49ers situation is one that their return on investment for Trey Lance so far has been terrible. There's no way around it. But at the same time, the 49ers are Super Bowl contenders, even in spite of the fact they've gotten terrible value so far out of the trade up to get Lance and the drafting of Trey Lance at number 3. Somehow, some way, they're still in the mix to be contenders. And I'll give you the long story short. It's because they've drafted extremely well in the lower rounds. So they haven't needed first-round picks to field a really, really good football team. And one of the lower round draft picks, in fact, the lowest draft pick of them all, has given them exactly what they wanted out of Trey Lance when they picked him. And that's the final draft pick of the 2021-22 event, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy has made this Trey Lance situation palatable for the 49ers. If Brock Purdy didn't exist, 49ers would be ringing the alarm bells right now, big time. But the goal, I talk about this a lot, the goal of the NFL draft is to throw a bunch of darts up against the wall with the most accurate throw you can manage. So you can train and try to make the throw as accurate as possible, but not everything is going to hit the bullseye. And some of the stuff is going to miss the target altogether. You do your best, but you're going to hit some and you're going to miss some. But the goal for the 49ers after 2020, and Kyle Shanahan said this on KMBR today, was to find a quarterback on a rookie deal who could carry the 49ers into cap sustainability throughout the 2020s. Because they realized they're paying Jimmy Garoppolo a lot of money. It was a palatable deal for the 49ers through 2021, even after they drafted Trey Lance. But the 49ers plan all along has been 2022, we need to turn the page to a quarterback on a rookie deal. We absolutely need to. That's the 49ers financial plan. The reason they're able to keep Garoppolo for 2022 is because he came back on a reduced salary. But they couldn't keep Garoppolo at the old number. They wanted to go QB on a rookie deal. They needed to go QB on a rookie deal because they had so many other star players under contract. That was the only way that this was going to be sustainable under the salary cap. So they chose Lance to do that job. Lance got his opportunity to do that job in 2022, broke his ankle in week 2. While Lance was out, Brock Purdy emerged. And Brock Purdy assumed the role that the 49ers had earmarked for Trey Lance. That's how the NFL works. Sometimes it's tough luck. Tough luck for Trey Lance because Brock Purdy was one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league last year over what was it, the 8 games over the course of last year. And he's come back and, this is where misinformation is just like, my goodness. A lot of people wanted things to be a certain way. They wanted Trey Lance to be the guy for whatever reason. We're not going to get into those reasons. It's a waste of time. But what people wanted has not matched up with what's actually happened. So because they wanted it to be a certain way, they automatically said, well, Brock Purdy hasn't been good this training camp. Sam Darnold hasn't been good this training camp. Trey Lance has been better than both of those guys. I'm sorry. Trey Lance hasn't even been better than Brandon Allen this training camp. Brandon Allen's a much smaller sample size, but he's been so steady for the 49ers with such a high floor. He's shown his QB2 chops from Cincinnati to the point where the 49ers are talking about trading Trey Lance now because they believe in Brandon Allen enough to be that third quarterback emergency insulation, just as much or more than Trey Lance. But there's not even a question that Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold have been better this training camp and in the preseason than Trey Lance. There's not a question. You can't just make up false narratives. There's been a lot of this going on. It's like, oh, look, Trey Lance is somehow better than Purdy and Darnold. No, he hasn't been. The stability at the position that the 49ers have gotten from Purdy and from Lance has been better. And you can't just sit there and count practice completions and attempts and interceptions. I do that, but I do that with perspective. I keep notes every day. I realize that Kyle Shanahan is looking for Brock Purdy to do different stuff as QB1 than maybe Trey Lance or Sam Darnold. And then, hey, even if you're going apples to apples with statistics out of practice, which I would advise against, you have to do it with context, but I would advise against it. Even if you're doing that, Darnold threw far fewer picks than Trey Lance, and that, risk aversion is a huge part of the QB2 story. A lot of people will talk about the ceiling of Trey Lance. Well, Darnold's got a ceiling too, but it's not as much about the ceiling as it is about the floor at QB2. Now, I will say it's intriguing. It's drama. The 49ers have 2 number 3 overall picks that were gunning for this QB2 spot. Darnold, the one who's been around a little bit longer, won it, probably because being around a little bit longer, finally getting to play with Kyle Shanahan showed that he can deliver a high floor. But either way, the point at the bottom of the screen stands. Lance didn't work out as QB1. At least he hasn't worked out as QB1 for the 49ers, even though they made a massive investment in him. The ROI hasn't been there. It would derail most other teams, but it hasn't derailed the 49ers because of an astounding story. And that's pick 262 working out. Pick 262, Brock Purdy working out, playing well again this camp, and they have more insurance now with Sam Darnold. And, it's just there's a couple things that have been wild from a symbolic perspective. One is that Purdy went with the very last pick. So the very last pick's ROI essentially cancels out the very poor ROI of somebody on the opposite end of a spectrum, which was the number 3 overall pick. That's crazy in and of itself, right? Another symbolically crazy thing is today, the day that Trey Lance didn't show up to practice because the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan said they sent him home and said to, go recollect himself after Sam Darnold was named QB2. The fact that Brock Purdy went 12 of 12 at practice today and just lit it up, that helped underscore this dynamic right here. It's an astounding story. And again, like I talk about throwing darts up against the wall in the draft. Some are going to hit, some aren't. Well, the 49ers with their, to expand on the dartboard analogy, your top picks, you're going to be a little bit closer to the board. So if you're closer to the board, you have a better chance of hitting a bullseye, right? But then you back up and your 7th round picks, your 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks, they're going to be further from the board. It's going to be harder to hit those theoretically. Well, what happened here is that the 49ers might have missed. And, it's even more complicated than that because we got to talk about the injuries right now. And I'm going to make another text title for this. But just say that for argument's sake, the 49ers missed with their dart throw of Trey Lance from close up. Then they backed up the next year in 2022. They backed up several steps. And they're as far back as you can possibly be in the draft. And they threw from pick number 262. So they backed up way the F back, right? And they're sitting there 20 yards away from the dartboard, and they throw with pick number 262. And it looks like they hit a bullseye with Brock Purdy. That's what's happened here, and that's why this is astounding. The 49ers missed from close up, and they hit the bullseye from further back. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one you hit with and which one you missed with, as long as you hit with one of them. And it really looks like they've hit with Brock Purdy. That's the perspective of this astounding story. And that's where we bring in the Lance Darnold inflection point. All right. So I'm going to open this up to a Q&A. I promised that I would talk about something. Oh, I talk about the injuries. Hold on. We got one more little piece of intel here that I've got to give you. Give me a little drum roll as I'm typing out this text title. All right. Give me the drum roll. Any honest evaluation of Trey Lance's ROI for the 49ers must start with his two injuries. There's a whole lot of garbage out there about, oh, the 49ers did this wrong, they did that wrong. It's like, here, sometimes football happens, and football is injuries, football is chaos. You've got to make order of the chaos. And if you want to make order of this chaos in an honest way, in an unbiased, honest way, you have to realize that in 2021, Trey Lance broke his finger in a preseason game. I mean, even the craziest commentators wouldn't say that that was Kyle Shanahan's fault. He broke his finger throwing a football. He hit it on a helmet against the Raiders. That happened. Now, we have to use our brains and analyze what the downstream effects of this were. Lance was not able to properly throw a football for nearly a full calendar year after breaking his finger against the Raiders. So that obviously set his development back, right? Unquestionably. The 49ers were trying to get him integrated. Now, the people who say that Trey Lance should have started in 2021 are flat out wrong. 100% wrong. You don't know football if you say that Trey Lance should have started in 2021, and you completely ignore data that we now have in retrospect that shows that the 49ers made the right decision. The 49ers went all the way to the NFC Championship game, and they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, even with a quarterback who, in Jimmy Garoppolo, who had a torn thumb ligament and a torn shoulder, which he had to have surgery for. We've already talked about that surgery. That in and of itself validates that they made the right decision. They gave themselves a shot to win a Lombardi trophy, and that was the best shot they could have given themselves. Jimmy Garoppolo was good in 2021. He was hurt in 2021. In fact, he was so good in 2021 that only the injury barely stopped the 49ers from going to the Super Bowl. Trey Lance coming out of North Dakota State, you have to be completely off your rocker to think that Trey Lance coming out of North Dakota State with a broken finger in week 3, we know that now in retrospect, would have been able to give the 49ers a better result in 2021. This is a competitive league. If you have a chance, a remote chance to try to win a Super Bowl, you try to go for it. And the 49ers, they had more than that. I mean, the 49ers were right in the thick of things. They're up by 10 in the NFC Championship game. So anyway, finger derails 2021. 49ers were trying to integrate Lance into the lineup that year. They couldn't do it because of the finger. You remember all the Lance package stuff they were running. They were subbing him into games, into practice in the middle of a drive the week of the Raiders game. Then he fractured the finger. We didn't find out the extent of the damage until much later, but that was the extent of the damage, and it pushed a year of Trey Lance development back, right? Okay, 2022, Trey Lance does get his opportunity to start. The 49ers realize they have to move to a quarterback on a rookie deal. Otherwise, things won't be financially sustainable for them. They cannot afford the final year of the big contract Jimmy Garoppolo signed in 2018. So they move on to Lance. Lance gets a chance to start. Garoppolo's still around, but that's on the renegotiated deal. That's a side note at this point. The truth is the 49ers went to Trey Lance at the beginning of the 2022 season. He started that game in Chicago. He started week 2 against Seattle. He had his opportunity, and the 49ers hoped that he would be able to develop alongside a very talented roster over the course of the season. But guess what happened? Football happened. Lance got hurt. It was too bad. He got hurt. And, you know, there was that whole crazy narrative about, oh, Shanahan shouldn't be running him. It's like, that's why the 49ers traded up to draft Trey Lance, because he was a dual threat quarterback. He could run. He led North Dakota State to a national championship because of his running ability, and they thought they could develop him as a passer. He was also coming off of a finger injury that had really compromised his play for a full year. So, of course, Shanahan was going to have to run him. Shanahan today had the point on his radio show that Geno Smith ran the same play that Trey Lance got hurt on 3 times in the game against the 49ers where Trey got hurt. Smith didn't get hurt, so people don't talk about it. But sometimes football happens, and Lance got hurt. And obviously that injury derailed Lance's development a second time. So you have 2 injuries in 2 seasons, and the NFL doesn't wait for anybody. Brock Purdy showed up in the interim, lit the world on fire, and Brock Purdy is now the 49ers QB1. Nobody with any sort of football background would say that Trey Lance is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. That's indisputable. at least amongst the reasonable masses of us. And I think there are reasonable masses. There are a lot of people who agree with this. If you put this to a poll, I think it'd overwhelmingly be in favor of Brock Purdy. Anyway, 49ers did what they had to do. They moved on to the guy who's actually performed versus the guy who, for whatever reason or reasons, the two fractures here, hasn't had that full chance to perform. But that's life. That's football. Sometimes football happens. So as we sit here and we consider that Trey Lance less than a year ago was the 49ers' first string quarterback and has now been demoted to third string in less than a year. As we sit here and we just appreciate what's happened, like we say, wow, this is cataclysmic what's happened. Well, we have to recognize any honest discussion begins with the fact that Lance has been hurt twice. The 49ers don't want him to fail. They never want it there. Like what person would invest a massive amount in a stock and then cheer for it to fail? They don't want it to fail, no. But the stock has tanked because of the two injuries. So the 49ers now have to play moving forward. They have to decide and make their decisions moving forward based on the reality of the current moment, not in the reality of 2021 when Lance was his pre-injury self. Things are different now. Developmental time has been lost. And most importantly, Brock Purdy has emerged. You know, it's funny because Matt Barrows wrote exactly this. And I'm going to put this up on the screen. Little column from Matt today. You check it out on The Athletic. The real reason that Trey Lance is in limbo is, well, exactly what we're talking about right now. Brock Purdy. Injuries and the opportunity for Brock. So there you have it. I'm going to open this up to Q&A. And let's get after it. 49ers Q&A. God, the comment section is going crazy. Eddie Dominguez, do I think the Vikings would be interested in Lance? I think there might have been interest this offseason, and I'm not sure about interest right now. The Vikings have Nick Mullins as their backup, and I hear that they really like Mullins. It's much harder to bring on a quarterback at this point in the process because, again, your roster is probably almost set. You've got your playbook down. Anywhere Lance goes, he's going to be a project. He was a project for the 49ers, and he is a project for the 49ers. Let me talk in present tense. Because if nobody's interested in him and you can't just offload him because of the cap costs, well, then you got to keep him and you got to keep on developing the project. So quarterbacks are assets. Will the Vikings be interested in the asset that is Trey Lance? Maybe, probably not. It's tougher at this time of the year. And if they aren't, well, then the 49ers still have Trey Lance under contract. If you say Lance to the Titans, well, Rand Carthon already had an opportunity to trade for him. And it doesn't sound like the 49ers got much of anything as far as an offer this offseason. Remember when the rumors first came out that the 49ers would be interested in trading Trey Lance? My response was, yeah, of course, he'd be interested in trading anyone at a specific price, but you can't just give him away, right? And to me, Lance's value had never been lower than it was this offseason. They might have raised his value a little bit over the course of training camp because he's reworked his throwing motion. He does look like a better quarterback in that regard. But the demand for quarterbacks is also not as high as it was in the offseason. So Lance didn't have much value in the offseason when the demand for quarterbacks was higher. Now the demand for QBs has dipped. His value might have gone up, so that might increase the chances that he slips through into a spot where there is demand for quarterbacks. But in all likelihood, the 49ers might have to wait a little bit until the regular season starts and some quarterback demand goes up with openings to be able to ship him off somewhere, which is why Kyle Shanahan is talking the way that I outlined. He's talking about, yeah, I might want to keep Trey Lance around. That would be a good thing for a football team if the math works out, if the situations work out, if we don't get a trade offer that allows us to feel good about chipping him away. So the 49ers right now, option power reigns supreme until you run into an option that is worth your time. No, Lance, the practice squad is not something that would happen because you'd have to waive him and you'd have to pay him a bunch of dead money and then re-sign him to the practice squad. With a first round pick, he's guaranteed all 4 years of his contract. You're either stuck with him on the 53-man roster and you make it work, if that's your best option, or you can waive him if you think somebody else might pick up his contract. Or I think best case scenario, based on the tea leaves that I'm reading from the 49ers, is they trade Trey Lance, but that might not be a possibility. The 49ers no longer have Anthony Averett available to them because he's on injured reserve. So, no. He's technically on the team, but he's on injured reserve. How much is Allen's cap hit if he makes the team? The cap savings on the Trey Lance trade are further reduced by the salary paid to Allen or any other quarterback. It's not big for Allen. Let me get my cap calculator out for you. Well, I'll put it on the screen, but first I want to go 49ers on over the cap. Why don't we pump this up to over 1,000? Why don't you tell all your friends that we're live right now? We're talking about Trey Lance. Let's bring some more people in. We had over 1,000 last night talking about Nick Bosa. Why can't we have over 1,000 tonight? I saw it climb up to like 850 and then it just kind of peaked. Maybe it's because it's late. It's already past 9. But maybe we get a few more in here. Wouldn't be a bad situation. Okay, so you asked about Brandon Allen. I'm going to put something up on the screen in a little bit, but first I'm going to answer your question. I accidentally clicked on an ad on Over the Cap. That was a mistake that I made because now I seem to have lost the page that I wanted to be at. Unbelievable. All right, now I'm hopefully opening up. Over the Cap and the 49ers page seems to be completely bogged down right now. So let me just open up my own cap page then. Think that's the better way around it. $49 salary cap. Here we go. All right, so take a look at this. Oh, I don't have Allen on here. I think okay, so here. Let me put this on the screen to prove to you that a 49ers cap page that I made actually does exist. Lance is a $9.3 million cap hit this year, but even if you cut him or trade him, he's still going to be counting against the cap and dead money because a lot of that was a $21 million signing bonus that was part of his contract when it was signed in 2021. So these are the 3 quarterbacks that are currently on my projection, but obviously things are subject to change. If you put Brandon Allen on there, he's going to cost about $1.1 million. So Lance, you've already paid Lance some money. You've already paid him $2.8 million this year for his roster bonus. You could save the $940,000 from this year, which is his base salary. But then obviously you'd have to carry Brandon Allen instead, or I presume you would, as a third quarterback. So that'd be $1.1 million. So essentially a wash right there as far as the dead money goes with Brandon Allen. I think that the main savings for Trey Lance would be for next year. And you have to remember that all 4 years of Trey Lance's contract are guaranteed as a first rounder. That's how first round picks work. So when all 4 years of his contract are guaranteed, and look, we can get Lance's contract up now. I think Over the Cap is working again. Good. It works. It absolutely works. Let me get this up on the screen. So you look here, here's the base salary. Here's the $22 million signing bonus. There's the roster bonus. I just highlighted it. In 2023, the 49ers had to pay that at the start of training camp. So the 49ers are on the hook for the prorated signing bonus portion, which is spread out like an accordion over the cap. They already paid this roster bonus. They can only save this much, $940,000 for this year. For next year, they'd be able to save the $1.055 million base salary and the 4.2 or $4.3 million roster bonus. But everything is guaranteed. And the prorated signing bonus, well, the 49ers, that's a sunk cost for the 49ers. So if they want to save money with Lance, they have to have another team pick him up, either through waivers or through a trade. Allen's cap hit is not very big. Allen is a much more cost-efficient quarterback for the 49ers. We have somebody thinking the 49ers are going to go 20-0. Hell, that's the crazy part of this, though. I'm not saying they're going to go 20-0, but they're still Super Bowl contenders with or without Lance. Lance has become a side note to the 49ers' potential success, despite the fact they invested so much in him, which is unbelievable to me. That's the astounding twist in all of this. Do I think Brock's game is comparable to Mahomes? It's more comparable than people who hate Brock Purdy think it is, because Brock can improvise a bit. He could scramble, and he's got more arm talent than you think he does. He doesn't have Mahomes' arm talent, but yeah, Mahomes lives off of the short game. Let's make that really clear. Mahomes' average depth of target was lower than Brock Purdy's last year. Andy Reid schemes up a nice short game that Mahomes must execute with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think every quarterback's game is comparable to another quarterback, because you can say what the differences are. Comparing somebody doesn't mean you're saying they're the same. You're saying, okay, this is the same and this is different. There are a lot of things about Brock Purdy's game that are similar to Patrick Mahomes' game that people don't give him credit for. The escapability is one of them. I mean, Mahomes escapes sacks like no other, right? The 49ers know that really well. Painful memories. Brock Purdy can escape sacks. He's got an elite 10-yard burst. Doesn't have a fast 40, but he's got a fast 10-yard burst. I've seen Purdy make off-platform throws. They both made the crazy off-platform throw that Mahomes is famous for in the Super Bowl. I don't even know if it was complete for Mahomes, but Purdy did that at Iowa State when he was stretched out, making that dive, throwing the ball. Anyway, there are some similarities in off-platform capabilities. I think Mahomes, a first-round pick, has greater athletic capabilities than Purdy, has a bigger arm than Purdy. But what ultimately matters is how well each of these two quarterbacks blends and melds with his play caller. Mahomes and Andy Reid obviously get along really well. It seems that Shanahan and Brock Purdy get along really well. But why don't we let this play out a little bit before we make final determinations? I mean, yeah, maybe a trade package is possible. It'll be hard to find a trade partner for Trey Lance right now. Won't be easy, I think. You could spice it up by making it a trade package, absolutely. Is that what you want to do? If somebody else has a good idea, maybe you turn to it. Maybe you can address a different position. But the more variables you toss into a potential trade, the unlikelier the ability to reach that outcome and consummate the trade is. I mean, the more complicated something gets, the more far-fetched it is. Just put it that way. Yeah, well, this is what I've been saying. Trey Lance's salary is guaranteed, right? So somebody's going to have to pick up his salary. And that's what makes trading him. I mean, that's one of the things that would make trading him difficult right now. I don't, they could, everything's connected with the cap. The 49ers have enough money in the short term to sign Nick Bosa, because his cap number will actually go down in 2023 in the near term. It'll go up later. So yeah, clearing up $5 million of space in 2024 would help the larger picture of the 49ers. But normally when you talk about a signing and two things being connected, it means, okay, do the 49ers need to do this to make that happen? And that's not the case right now. They can sign Bosa, as I explained yesterday, and lower his cap hit this year, which means they're going to open up money. Now, trading Trey would also open up money. But if both of these things open up money, you don't need one thing to do the other. I have no updates on the kick return and the nickel battle because the 49ers have been practicing. They play on Friday. They've said that Diamante Lenore is going to cover slot receivers in all likelihood, and Isaiah Oliver will make the team to cover tight ends in 12 personnel. So that's what Steve Wilkes said. I don't know if that's what the 49ers are going to do, but we'll keep our eye on their actions. More questions. Sam Darnold today, so. He went 4 of 9, but there was a drop and a bat down in there. So it was a short practice today. They didn't wear pads for the first time after donning pads in training camp. 49ers took it easy. Brock Purdy, though, was awesome. Brock Purdy went 12 of 12. So he was very sharp. Darnold, it was whatever today. Would a Lance trade for Lael Collins work from Michael Powers? I would have to look at Collins' cap situation. I mean, this stuff only works if other teams want to take on Trey Lance, though. So, and with a veteran like Collins, you could rework the deal to make it fit into your cap situation. So, on first blush, I'll say yes, but trades only work if two parties are there to tango. It does take two to tango. Could read some of Kyle Shanahan's answers on Trey Lance. I have to plug in my computer very quickly. So give me 1 second here. For some reason, there we go. We're charging again. We are back. It's Kyle Shanahan on Trey Lance today. Will either of Purdy's roommates make the team this year? Alfredo Gutierrez will make the team as the international exception. He won't make the 53-man roster, though. He'll make the practice squad as an international exception. And I think the Nick Zakelj is on a good track. When Aaron Banks cramped up, and that was a cramp, by the way, for Aaron Banks yesterday, so he wasn't hurt. Aaron Banks cramped up, had to go back to the locker room. The 49ers' first reserve in for the left guard spot was Nick Zakelj. Wasn't John Feliciano. So I think that's an arrow up for the second-year man, Nick Zakelj, who also happens to be Brock Purdy's teammate. I mean, this is not even a question for the players. Purdy or Lance, I mean, this hasn't been a question for the 49ers team ever since Brock Purdy came in and took over and did a great job last year. I mean, Brock Purdy's a lot better than Trey Lance. NFL players want a chance to win. This is their livelihood, too. It's better for everybody in the building for the team to win, not the team to lose. So if you want the team to win, you want the guy who's going to give you the best chance to win. The guy that is going to give you the best chance to win is the better quarterback. Brock Purdy is the better quarterback out of him and Trey Lance. So, yeah, the 49ers like Brock Purdy. But guess what? It's not exclusive to them liking Brock Purdy or Trey Lance. They could like both of these guys. They can say, we like Brock Purdy. We like Trey Lance. They're both good for our room. Let's try to keep as many of these guys as possible. And if it's not feasible to keep them, if you get offered a nice return for Trey Lance and it's better to slide Brandon Allen in there, well, then you do that too. So at the end of the day, there are good personal relationships here, but it's a business. And the 49ers just have to proceed along the path that's the best business path for them. And then obviously quarterback number 2 is Sam Darnold. And, this is another thing. With Sam Darnold, it's patently ridiculous. The amount of heat that I was taking for pointing out the obvious. The obvious is that Sam Darnold's a better quarterback 2 option than Trey Lance. It became obvious over the course of the past 2 weeks. Give a lot of credit to Trey Lance for the improvement that he made with Jeff Christensen this offseason. Give a lot of credit for the battle that it was. But it became very apparent once these preseason games started that the choice was Sam Darnold for 2. You just watch the way that these guys play. Maybe it's more apparent when you're there in person, but you watch the command of the pocket, you watch the accuracy on short passes, you watch even the accuracy on intermediate passes over a longer run. I think Lance threw some true dimes, but the more stable commodity was Sam Darnold. I mean, from the first throw that he made against the Raiders when he found Ronnie Bell deep, it was okay. This guy is in full control over what's going on here. He hadn't come close to throwing an interception, and don't tell me he threw a pick against the Broncos that clanged off of Ronnie Bell's hands. That's not a QB pick. That's a receiver pick. Against the Raiders, there was that one throw that he kind of missed. I think it was to Bell as well. I forgot if it was Bell, but somebody said, oh, the linebacker got his hands on it. The linebacker was running in the opposite direction. I mean, the risk management was completely fine. That there was no chance that was ever going to be picked from Sam Darnold. And that's what Sam Darnold has had to improve. He threw too many picks for the Jets. He threw too many picks for the Panthers. But he improved in that regard last year over the final 6 games, right? Over the final 6 games for Carolina, Sam Darnold cut down the interception rate to better than league average. And Shanahan liked that tape. And Shanahan thought that in this 49ers system, Sam Darnold would thrive. The best football that we've seen from Sam Darnold could happen with the 49ers system. And so far, I think that the 49ers think that's been the case based on what they've seen in practice. Again, he's thrown only 1 interception all of camp and preseason that hasn't clanged off of a receiver first. So 3 total, 1 that hit off of that was directly to a defender. So Sam Darnold is definitely addressing his interception issue. If the 49ers do see him during the regular season, he'll have a chance to prove that during the regular season. You know, somebody was arguing the other day, oh, well, nobody's game planning against Sam. Well, Sam hasn't game planned for anybody the other way. You game plan to avoid interceptions, obviously, and score points, and defenses game plan to create turnovers, takeaways. Nobody's done any game planning yet because it's the preseason. I think this week we'll probably finally see some game planning because it's the dress rehearsal. So we'll see some from the Chargers. We'll see some from the 49ers. But it'll be more of the same. It'll be Sam Darnold working in the number 2 quarterback spot that he's earned. And to be honest, it's absolutely insane that people on the internet go up and fabricate narratives, fabricate stats, fabricate what happened in practice, and say, oh, okay, this guy's a lot better. I know better than the coaching staff, who, by the way, the 49ers coaching staff has way more invested in Trey Lance than anybody sitting behind a keyboard ever will, right? The 49ers staff invested so much in Lance, and through it all, they determined before the last preseason game, because they'd seen enough, they determined that Sam Darnold was the better QB2 option than Trey Lance. Just because you feel that shouldn't be true doesn't mean that it isn't true. It's true because professionals, coaches, people who watch football have determined that it's beyond obvious that Sam Darnold should be the 49ers QB2. And it doesn't matter what somebody sitting behind a keyboard with Twitter or X or whatever you call it these days thinks if it's different, because they're not the people making this decision. I was wondering what your estimation has been on Colton McKivitz and if the 49ers have any potential alternative if he doesn't step up. Well, they think he's going to step up. I'd be more worried about the depth. McKivitz was good in his first action this past week. 9 pass blocking snaps, no pressures allowed. They think that they've developed him to a point where he's going to be reliable there. I think the bigger question is injury. What if Colton gets hurt? Because he has had injury issues in the past. And that's where I think the 49ers' biggest concern, and everybody wants to talk about the quarterback position right now. Well, the biggest concern is the offensive line depth. Today, Chris Furster said, we need more from Colton McKivitz, that was a slip, from Jalen Moore. They haven't gotten as much from Jalen Moore as they've wanted to get from him. Furster also said that, Matt Pryor's doing better, but he's only lined up on the right side, not on the left side. So maybe they do a dual swing situation, right? Like they did with Jalen and Colton McKivitz last year behind Trent Williams and Mike McGlinchey. Maybe this year you have Matt Pryor as the backup right tackle and Jalen Moore as the backup left tackle. That would be only Trent Williams backup, but Trent's not been good for full seasons. They need somebody to fill in there. So they need more from Jalen Moore. And again, maybe this whole trade extravaganza with Trey Lance ends up with the 49ers bringing in a tackle. I don't know. I can't sit here and just make stuff up, though. I think, I base my reporting on facts. So it's possible that the 49ers do something like that, but let's base our reporting on facts and let's not speculate. Let's react to it when it does happen. Facts, not feelings. Hell yeah. Cheers to you. Time for me to get a drink, even though I'm not drinking for 75 days. Still have 3 weeks to go. It will be time for me to go get a burrito, though. That's where I'm going right after this show is done. And we're an hour in. I think we're good now. What do you think, Mike? Are we ready to call it? Or should we stick around? Let me know, Mike. Mike could Slack me, or Mike can tell people in the chat section, and I'll look for Mike's comment. We're going to call it. That's it. Time for me to get a burrito. Well, it's been good stuff today. I mean, we went through everything. And, all this stuff, like, yeah, obviously the 49ers think it's obvious that Darnold is their QB2. They can also still think that Trey Lance can develop. There just may not be room for him on this team, or there might be room to do it. Nothing is determined yet. And maybe I'll just leave this with you. The 49ers still have options with Trey Lance. Do not expect them to fully relinquish these options. Just don't. They're going to hold on to options as long as they possibly can. Now, when they lose their options, that's anybody's debate right now. We'll see when they do. The cut down is an inflection point because there's an opportunity cost for carrying Trey Lance beyond that. But if you can't find a trade partner, maybe you need to absorb that opportunity cost. Maybe that's your best play. So we have to wait and we have to see. Cooler heads will prevail. Let it develop organically. I've said that the whole offseason, and you can see that I was right. Let it develop organically. That's what's going to happen with the 49ers in this quarterback situation. The organic development has Purdy set at QB1, Darnold set at QB2, Trey Lance's future in limbo. I think by extension, Brandon Allen's future still in limbo. Well, guess what? The 49ers don't have to decide today. We'll see if Lance is back out there and playing on Friday. We'll get more of this story as time progresses. We'll see if there was a trade demand in there. I don't know. I mean, Kyle Shanahan obviously only talked on KMBR today. So I don't know what Lance's camp wants. I don't know who leaked this information. It might have come from the agent, but we don't know for sure. All of these things make 49ers football the most dramatic reality TV show that there is. And we can be thankful for that because it's fun to talk about, right? Got a nice little community here. So thanks everybody for joining. And remember, the 49ers still have options with Trey Lance, and don't expect them to fully relinquish these options. With that, good night.